going to introduce him because that's just going to be weird. I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of better code review. So I guess a lot of you know me. I'm a Perl web data consultant, work with quite a few companies, and most of the places I've worked recently do code review, so I've kind of got a moderate amount of experience, although I suspect you all have quite a lot of experience as well. So what I don't want to do is say to you, here's how you will do it better. But I want to kind of share a few ideas, a few experiences to give you thoughts about how you might want to improve the way you do code review. And I'm going to break this down into kind of separate sections, about before the code review, during it, afterwards, and then talk about some of the tools that people use. So I think before you submit your code review, there's a few things you need to think about. You need to understand and agree on with the reviewers and the person whose code is being reviewed. And it's quite easy sometimes to just say, hey, can you review this? And people come back with a huge amount of comments because you didn't say what it was that you were looking for. And I've been talking to various people about code review, and some people have quite strong ideas that code review should only be about bugs. It should never involve style or suggestions or hey, did you think about this? But I don't think that's right. I think understand the people you're working with. Obviously, the reviewer wants to get improved code, but the people reviewing the code also have a chance to learn and to think by reading the code. And I think the reading aspect of code reviews is often underrepresented. Could you imagine if you met a musician who said, well, I write music. He said, oh, right, what music do you write? He said, well, I don't listen to music, I just write music. But yet, in our profession, we seem to have a lot of programmers who kind of write code, but don't read code. So I think the idea of code review as something that helps the reviewer is something that people sometimes miss out on. So understand what it is you're trying to achieve from your code review. Agree on that up front. And who are you going to involve? Well, it's really tempting to kind of involve the person who's been involved with the code base for the longest time, who knows all the insides, outs, and obviously it can be helpful to have them review. But you probably also, maybe you want to bring in a few people who have a particular interest or keenness in something, or perhaps people who don't have much experience. But talk with the people who you're reviewing, and maybe maybe not everyone reviewing everything. Kind of figure out who's going to review, and give your reviewers the context that they need. Tell them why this code has been written. Where did it come from? If you have a ticket or some kind of business plan about things, point people at that so they know where this code comes from. If it's very strong user interface work, try and spin up an instance of the application that people can go and use. So they're not just looking at the code, but they're seeing what the consequences of the code are. So they've got a bit more context around whatever it is that you're doing. So that's kind of the preparation side of it. Coming on to when you're reviewing someone else's code. When you're reviewing someone else's code, tell people, don't just say this doesn't work, but explain why it doesn't work. If it is code, can you write a test case for it? Can you write a test to show where the problem is in this is? If it's a UI thing, don't just say feature X doesn't work. Click on this, enter this text. So make sure that you're not just saying this doesn't work, but say why. And I think even worse than saying this doesn't work is saying I don't like this, which you do see sometimes. Don't tell people what you don't like. Tell them why you don't like it. So don't just say, oh, I don't like this or I don't like this, but think carefully about why you would prefer something. What's the advantage of doing it this way? The reason we're writing code is to further some sort of aim, something we're aiming towards. It's not to make us all to satisfy our own egos. And of course, obviously, when you're doing code review, be kind. And I put this on here. I think it's really obvious that sometimes I'm reviewing code and I find myself getting really grumpy at it, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? And then I realise, of course, it's code I know. But make sure that try and if you are tempted to kind of do that whole angry on the keyboard thing, just step back, come back to it in a little while. Now, of course, once the review's taken place, you have to figure out, well, what do we do with it? How do we move this review forward so that the code is out there and released? Sometimes it's really easy to have a whole load of comments on your code review. And I've already mentioned that it's helpful beforehand to understand, make sure everyone involved understands what the scope of the review is. But even then, sometimes you'll find that there's a lot of detail in there. And I think often, make sure you've reviewed your code before anyone else does. Try and find problems before you. Code review isn't basically a way of outsourcing responsibility. You're still responsible for what you produce. And if people have gone to the effort to comment on your code, don't just ignore their comments. If you are going to say, well, actually, I'm not doing that, think about why they suggested it. Try and give a good reason. Because, again, all this builds up kind of the knowledge amongst your team. So, say if someone says, I think you should do these reasons, say, yeah, those reasons are good, but these reasons seem more important to me. So have the conversation backwards and forwards. And I accept that people have habits. We're not always going to agree. Sometimes you just have to let go, because disagreement happens. That's kind of life. But of course, code review isn't about making things perfect. It's just about making things better according to the parameters you've chosen beforehand. Now, there are lots of code review tools out there, and it's very easy to kind of fixate on the tools. You go, the code review tool we're using is crap. It doesn't do this. It doesn't do that. You don't really always need tools. Where I'm working at the moment, I'm working with one other developer, and we sit next to each other and we say, hey, I've just pushed some stuff to this branch. Can you have a look at it? You look at it and go, what's going on here? So we're doing code review, but we don't have a code review tool. Of course, in a larger organisation, that would probably be a bit mad, but with Turvers, that works really well. So figure out, don't obsess over the tool. Find a tool that's good enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. The right tool, the right choice doesn't exist. And once you've found something that's good enough, customise it. Don't just install your code review software and go, here we go, here's the code review software. And don't just customise it, but iterate. Whilst you're doing code reviews, look back over the past few months. What are the recurring things that are happening in code review? What's going well, what's going badly, and make sure you move over that. Start simple is what I've already touched on. You don't need this, and this to do code review. All you need is to find someone sat next to you and say, hey, can you have a look at this? At the London PM Hack Day the other weekend, I was working on some code, and before I pushed it to CPAM, I posted a thing on ISD and said to people, hey, have a look at this. And a couple of people sat next to me, downloaded the code, and said, what's going on here? This thing doesn't work, stuff like that. So that was really useful. Code review can be in form as well as form. And so I think really, in conclusion, code review is something that can be improved. If you're working in an environment where it feels set in stone, try something different. Maybe just for one bit of review, use a different tool. Maybe use no tool at all. Talk with your team. And of course, as with all this stuff, listen to what people are saying, rather than just think, don't go around telling everyone, we need to do this, we need to do this. Just try and get a feel for how to improve things gradually. This was just meant to be a quick talk with some ideas to throw out there, and I'd love to talk to people about all this afterwards. This is me. You can contact me through the internet or via the real world in Meetspace. Do we have any questions? John?
One of the things that I read when I was being sentenced to do a code review, and I insisted to my boss that this was universally accepted truth, was never do more than 1 hour's code review a day, otherwise your eyes will glaze over. And I was very glad that I insisted on that, because I did find my eyes glazing over after about an hour. Is that your experience?
I've definitely had days when I spend a lot of time reviewing code and I get sloppy. I think it's worth mixing it up with other activities. I think that'd be a really good thing for a bunch of us to share kind of war stories on afterwards. I think, as with lots of things, if it's something you have to concentrate really carefully on, if you don't step away from it now and again,
It was just the point about you had things to agree before the code review, and I think one of the things that would be handy when people submit code reviews is if there's a deadline. They go, you mention it.
That's a really good one, actually.
And not just chase.
Yeah.
So send a code review, and then a couple of days later they'll be like, "This needs to go live today. Can you?"
So I mean, it's another W word, isn't it? At the start, I had who's reviewing, what are they reviewing? But when is totally. When is the one I missed out? That's really good. Paul, I think we've got time for one last one.
I was just going to make a point that sometimes it's good to give positive feedback as well as negative. So if someone went to a lot of trouble to document a piece of functionality as why it's doing what it's doing, why it's doing this kind of thing, just give them a plus one. It's always good to say, give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, that's a really good point as well. Code review is not like beating people with a stick. It's all of you trying to understand what good code looks like. So if you encounter bad code, sure, say so. But if you encounter good code, good documentation, make sure you're reaffirming the habits that you want to reaffirm. Totally. Thank you for that. Next up, so now I'm going to